The culture tells us that science has disproved the Bible and that what we believe is a fairy tale. That's the general message of the culture. And they dominate. Anyway, when they say that science disproves the Bible, what they're talking about is evolution and millions of years. That's what they're talking about. Because if you know the definition of science, you'll realize that science really isn't against the Bible. Science is about what we see and observe and can repeat. You can't repeat evolution. You can't observe it. It's in the past. There's nothing in present-day observations or science that is against the Bible. It's their interpretations of that evidence, a very key point that people don't realize. Their interpretations. Now, their interpretations are based on what they believe about the past. And their beliefs come from the time of the so-called Enlightenment, starting mainly in the late 1700s, where they threw out God, the Bible, and they decided to explain everything without God by pure man's reason. That's the so-called Enlightenment. And that continues today. That's what they follow. And so it's that worldview that is contrary to Christianity and the Bible. And that worldview is based on assumptions they made over 200 years ago with little or no evidence. They also say that we cannot explain anything in the natural world by our biblical ideas of creation and the flood, the Tower of Babel. Oh yeah? Well, we're going to check them on that. We're going to test them on the Ice Age. I'm going to make a case, the Ice Age, that only the Bible can explain it. That's a provocative subtitle, but it'll work its way out. I'll tell you, okay. What is an ice age? An ice age is a great increase in snow and ice. Right now, 10% of the continental areas are glaciated, mainly Greenland and Antarctica. During the ice age, it was 30%, mainly in the high and mid-latitudes, and the tropical mountain areas were glaciated down about 3,000 feet lower than they are now. Also, I'm going to make a case that it's the last major event in Earth history. It's the last major event. Okay. This area was glaciated. How many knew that? You see glacial moraines. I saw some along the highway. Anyway, there's actually, in the secular version, there's actually 5 ice age periods. The Pleistocene, or the Quaternary they call it also, is less than 2.6 million years. That's one. Then about 280 million years ago, 450, 600 to 900, and around 2,000 million years in the rocks. They see what they think are ice age deposits in the rocks. But the Pleistocene ice age is the only real ice age and only their last, because over the years, they started with 1 in the 1800s, expanded to 4. That held for about 60 years, and now they believe in 50 ice ages in the last 2.6 million years of what's called the Pleistocene. But that represents the real ice age, even though part of the Pleistocene does not. The other 4 can be explained by gigantic submarine landslides during the flood, which is what I've written on that, a fairly in-depth study showing that. Anyway, here's the challenge of the ice age that they give us. Each ice age, they say, takes 100,000 years. The glacial phase takes 90,000, the interglacial 10,000. And there's been about 50 regularly repeating ice ages during the last 2.6 million years. Now, if some of you with mathematical skills realize that doesn't quite add up, but older than 1 million years ago, they say they oscillated every 40,000 years. And then 1 million years ago, they started to oscillate 100,000 years. I'm talking about thousands. So it all adds up to about 50 of them. Well, where do they get that information? You'd be surprised. It's not on the land where the ice occurred. It's in the deep sea. They send these deep sea cores down there at the bottom, pick up some bottom sediments, and they measure all kinds of variables. And they, like all variables, they wiggle around an average. So this is what they do down the core. So when it goes this way, it's a glacial. When it goes that way, it's an interglacial, so forth, so on, 50 times or so. That's where they get it from. But on land, you mainly see one ice age. Here's a verbal challenge by Arthur Strahler, an anti-creationist. He says, increasing the duration of the ice age by a factor of about 10 greatly increases the stress upon the creation scientist, who must compress the events of 15 million years into 4,000 years of post-flood time. We got it right, it's post-flood, as I'll get into as we go on, but where does this increasing the duration 10 times come from? Well, they decided because of some other features they found that the Antarctic ice sheet is 10 times as old as they thought. So they expanded it 10 times and says, well, that puts even more pressure on us by doing that, he says. Well, let's check these things out with time. When you get challenges like this is my theme verse for research and actually for life. Examine everything carefully. Hold fast to that which is good. You hold fast to the Bible as God's Word. And Jesus is our Lord and Savior. But examine everything carefully. If you don't do it carefully, you might know just enough to get in trouble. You got to go kind of deep. Now, that's kind of hard for some people, but the answers are actually out there. We have websites, resources, all kinds of stuff that can bless you to find answers to a lot of the questions. So, I'm going to present this as a series of questions. The first question we need to ask, was there really an ice age? Am I trying to explain something that never really existed? Well, where are we going to find evidence for the ice age? Well, we go to places currently glaciated and see what occurs. And then we go to places like here and see signs similar to that. And we can deduce that this area was glaciated. And where do we go? I went to the beautiful Athabasca Glacier in the Canadian Rockies and see what it occurs. Now, practically all glaciers in the world have been receding because it was out here in 1890 because of global warming. Yes, global warming is true, but you need to know more about it than that. First of all, it's been small, about 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit since 1880. You can make a case that 50% of the global warming is due to natural processes, mainly on the sun, but there's ocean current cycles and differential volcanism. So I've deduced, in fact, I have a DVD on global warming over there, that more than 50% of that global warming is due to natural processes. But the other 50%, which is about 0.8 degrees Fahrenheit, is due to man adding carbon dioxide. It's just 0.8 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty small. It's not. We have plenty of time to do more research to find out more about it, to save the planet. We don't have to act now, spend hundreds of billions of dollars to so-called fight global warming. There's just a lot of propaganda in this whole area. Anyway, I'm going to get off that tangent. I can get on tangents pretty easy. But I can get myself off pretty easy. But anyway, what do we see here? We see mounds of debris, rocks of all sizes, all mixed up. And that's formed as a ridge in the front of the glacier. That's a terminal moraine or end moraine. How many have heard and know what a terminal moraine, end moraine is? Just a few of you. And then along the edges, there's a lateral moraine. It's on the edge. You form these things by the glacier pushing the debris out, melt, and leave the debris at the edge. In the front, end moraine, terminal moraine, or along the sides, a lateral moraine. You can see the lateral moraines on the sides here. And I took this slide probably 55 years ago when I was young and stupid, going up on top of a glacier full of crevasses. And there's the lateral moraine right there, very sharp looking. You can see some of the boulders sticking out, all kinds of debris. And then as a glacier moves, it picks up boulders, and the boulders scratch against the bedrock, scratching the bedrock in the direction of motion. And the rock in the glacier can shift within the plastic of the ice. And it forms scratches in different directions, like you see here on this boulder here. And then here's some of the bedrock that's scratched in the direction of motion. Those are typical signs of glaciated areas. So we're going to look around and see what we see in the world. And of course, I'm going to look in my area, and this is near Augusta, Montana. There's a Rocky Mountain front in the background, and here in the foreground you see a ridge. A mound is sticking out it's generally a flat plain, and here you have a big mound of debris. And it was broken through here, probably because it dammed up a lake that broke through, and therefore they put the reservoir there. I think that's Pishkin Reservoir. And what do you see in that moraine material? Well, it's rocks of all sizes mixed together, typical of a terminal moraine. And you see scratched rocks in different directions, in fact, in the boulders in that moraine. And then when you go up onto the first cliff in the Rocky Mountain front, you see the scratched bedrock where the glacier moved from west to east over that 800-foot cliff there and out about 15 miles onto the plains. That's as far as it went. So this area was glaciated. And summers are very warm there. They're in the 80s. You have to cool off summers in this area for ice to occur in the Rockies and the high plains down to at least freezing. Actually below. I'm going to run some numbers by you here pretty soon. And you also in the mountainous areas to the west, you see these horseshoe-shaped moraines. This is at the Wallowa Mountains in northeast Oregon near Enterprise, Oregon, where a glacier pushed out into a valley and formed a lateral and terminal moraine. Here's the end moraine right there. It's only about 100 feet tall. And it scooped up a lot of rock within this. It over deep in this valley, and a lake formed in this area. And here's the lateral moraine around it. And when you go down to the bottom, you can see the trees for scale. That moraine is 600 feet tall, meaning the ice probably in that valley to the right was probably around 2,000 feet thick that came out to just the edge of the plain there. And when you look at the material, the rocks in the moraine, they're the typical glacial moraine features, rocks of all sizes mixed together. And so that area was glaciated, but that area gets up in the low 90s for highs in the summer, and you have to cool it down to at least 32. Drastic climate change. And then you find all these erratic boulders transported from somewhere else and deposited here, like these are the famous Okotok erratics, found from Jasper, Canada, down to Cut Bank, Montana, in a line, a trail they call it. This is probably the largest one. It's a quartzite angular boulder. Now, it's not going to roll down in water or anything like that. It had to be transported by an iceberg, which you had plenty of those during the melting phase of the ice. And then here's a famous erratic southwest of Portland, Oregon, about 50 miles in the Willamette Valley. It's a shale, but it's been heated up and metamorphosed a little bit, called an argillite. This is the same type of formation you find in this area in western Montana of the belt supergroup, argillite, and around Spokane, Washington. So it came from the area of Montana, transported out in Oregon. There is no argillite outcrops in the whole state of Oregon. So how did it get out here? And it's about 150 miles south of where the ice came from British Columbia down to Olympia, Washington. So what's it doing here? Well, it was transported in the Lake Missoula flood. The valleys of western Montana were filled up with water. It was 2,000 feet deep at the Idaho-Montana border and about 1,000 feet over Missoula. And then it broke through the ice and filled up Glacial Lake Columbia along the edges of the Cordilleran ice sheet. And then it spilled over to the southwest, carving up eastern Washington and spreading erratic boulders from Montana way out into Oregon. They're all through that path. And from space, you see the path of the flood. This is eastern Washington. This is a braided stream channel about 100 miles wide. When it went over Spokane, Washington, it was 600 feet high. Through the Columbia Gorge, it was 1,000 feet high. When it came out in the Portland, Vancouver area, it spread out and it was about 400 feet high over Portland. So this is a monstrous flood. And it was so monstrous that the secular world rejected it for 40 years because it was too biblical in scale, showing their tremendous bias. They're never going to see evidence for the flood. And I've shown in my materials, the evidence for the flood is abundant everywhere. But you got to tune your mind to what to look for. And when you add it all up, here is the area that was glaciated during the Ice Age. Practically all Canada, the northern United States, mountainous area. This is a schematic, not meant to be accurate. Just the mountains of Alaska were glaciated, the lowlands weren't. Now that's a major mystery of earth science, because when they run their computer models for the Ice Age, they glaciate the lowlands and highlands of Alaska the same. So why not? Well, it's because they got the wrong concepts, to sum it all up. Then in Europe and Asia, this is the general location of the ice sheet. And just the mountains of Siberia, northern of Siberia, were glaciated. The lowlands weren't. That's where you find the woolly mammoth fossils by the millions, entombed in the permafrost, not in the rock, in the permafrost. And they're not in glacial ice either. They're in windblown silt called loess or loess, L-O-E-S-S. It's actually a German term called Lurs, but no one recognizes that in the U.S. So that's where you find the woolly mammoth, which I talked about last night. So there was an ice age. But can they explain it? You know, I'm a researcher. I've been researching in creation science for 45 years. I scan about 50 in the library at Montana State University, 50 earth science journals online, and I look for all kinds of articles, and I find a lot. And so that's why I've got I got hundreds of articles I published as a result with all these gems of information. And when I'm exploring an area, which I've explored a lot of areas in glaciology and geophysics and geology, I find that most of the time it's not only a challenge for us, it's a challenge for them. It's a challenge for them, but you might not know that if you actually took a course and they talked about it, because they're good at smoothing things over with an extra hypothesis. But when you dig deep, you find out, they're challenged a lot. So are they challenged on the Ice Age? They accuse us that we need to explain it. But can they? Well, what do we need for an Ice Age? This will give you an idea of whether they can explain it or not, and what we need to explain. Well, the requirements for an Ice Age are cooler summers. Got to cool it down to at least 32 so the snow doesn't melt over the warm season. Winters are already cold enough in most areas. In fact, it'd be a benefit to have warmer winters, because the warmer the air, the more the moisture it holds. And in fact, this is the problem why, and you need greater snowfall. This is why there's over 60 theories of the Ice Age by them, because if they can find a cooling mechanism, it dries the air, and they don't get the snowfall. See, they got problems. So we need both of them for an Ice Age. And you can't get a climate change just for a summer or a year. You got to get it persisting for quite a while. So it persists for many years, the third requirement. So based on the requirements of an Ice Age, how much temperature change are we talking about? Well, a man did a computer study where he wanted to find out where the 1-inch line remained early in the fall. In other words, this is supposed to start the Ice Age with the 1-inch line. So, but he doubled the snowfall for Canada, unfortunately. He had less solar radiation, so he had some benefits for his model. But still, when he cooled off the average summer temperature of Canada by increments of 2 degrees centigrade, this is where the 1-inch line was. When he cooled it off 12 degrees centigrade, which is about 20 degrees Fahrenheit, the 1-inch line was just in northeast Canada. That's it. That's as far as he got. But the glaciers went clear down or ended up south of the Great Lakes, northern Montana. By the way, they didn't move from the north in Canada at a glacial pace to finally reach. They generally, in the model I've developed, the ice sheets mostly grew in place. An instant winter suddenly was there, and they grew more or less in place. So that's a lot of cooling. But how much cooling do we need along the edges of the ice sheet in northern United States? Well, let's take a city like Minneapolis. The average summer temperature is 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That includes the maxes and the mins. And they have to cool it down to at least 32, but you actually have to cool it below that because the main mechanism to melt snow and ice is solar radiation. And you get a lot of it in the summer at higher latitudes and middle latitudes. So we got to go quite a bit below freezing. So what I did is I got a paper of when do they get net melting of ice and snow in Antarctica and the lowlands. Well, when the temperature warms up to 14 degrees Fahrenheit is when they get net melting of the snow and ice. 14 degrees Fahrenheit. So Minneapolis has to be somewhere near there. I'll say be conservative and say 20 degrees. You have to cool off summer temperatures to average 20 degrees Fahrenheit for snow and ice to accumulate at Minneapolis. That's a fall of 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, this might give you a hint that maybe they're going to have some problems explaining this, especially when they use what's called uniformitarianism to explain all the past, the rocks, the fossils, the climate. How many know what uniformitarianism is? Not a one of you. Okay. It's uniform processes extrapolated over millions of years. Present processes. What we see today, like flooding in rivers and sedimentation, is what we can use to explain all the rocks and the fossils in them. Present processes. That's what they use. That's the dogma of geology today. And same with climatology. So climate processes are what is required. Well, the climate's not going to be that sensitive to cause this, but they think, well, the changes in the Earth's orbital geometry might help, but that's a very light process. So they're really stuck. They're really stuck. And I'm going to go to the experts in the Ice Age and show how stuck they are. J.K. Charlesworth, in the book The Quaternary Era, it's a 1,700-page book on the Ice Age. Great material. Anyway, he says, Pleistocene phenomenon, they produce some great theories, haven't they? No. An absolute riot of theories, ranging from the remotely possible to the mutually contradictory and the palpably inadequate. That includes every one of them, including the one that they believe in right now called the astronomical theory. But that was in 1957, and this is modern science, right? We know so much more about it, right? Wrong. Let's go to a more recent quote. U.S. News and World Report reported on the 18 top mysteries of science. 18 top ones in 1997. And here's some of them right here. By the way, some of these problems or mysteries are mysteries of their own making because they believe in evolution. That first one, why should males exist? Did you notice that? What's up with that? Why is that a big mystery? Some of you women might understand. It's a mystery because in evolution, you should have one sex and it reproduces asexually. They can't figure out why there's a male and a female. It's a great mystery, and they write articles and books on it every year trying to solve this puzzle. But this is where our biblical worldview has evidence hands down on them, because it simply says God made us male and female. But some of them are legitimate mysteries, and one of them is what causes ice age. It made the top 18 mysteries. What causes ice ages? And a more recent quote, David Alt, University of Montana, a retired professor, in his book Glacial Lake Missoula and its Humongous Floods. Yes, they just can't believe in one flood. They have to be many floods because it sounds more uniformitarian, like that's a present process we should expect. So they have about 100 Lake Missoula floods, by the way. He says, although theories abound, no one really knows what causes ice ages. He said that in 2001 in the most widely read journal in the world, Nature. These guys said in 2008, perhaps the longest standing puzzle in the earth sciences is what causes the northern hemisphere ice sheets to come and go. So they don't know. They are clueless. Their mechanism doesn't work. But then can we explain it? can we explain it with our biblical worldview? First of all, we have to figure out, when did it occur? Did it occur before the flood, during the flood, after the flood? Well, it's pretty obvious that the flood, with all its warm water, wouldn't support any ice sheets, because they have to take some time to grow. And if it was before the flood, it'd be destroyed. So it obviously has to be after the flood. But we don't have ice sheets over North America and Europe and Asia now. So where we put it is in a transitional climate between the flood and the present climate, because we know these features are post-flood, and they're very sharp, like those scratched bedrocks I showed. They haven't weathered out. So the ice age was recent, not that long ago. And it's on top of flood rocks. So we put it in a transitional climate between the flood and the present climate. So that suggests that, maybe the flood was what caused the climate change. Oh, let's check that out. How would that happen? Well, the flood was a gigantic volcanic event. And at the end of the flood, you'd have all this volcanic dust in the atmosphere, and especially aerosols in the stratosphere. They would be up there anywhere from 2 to 10 years. And these aerosols, they're sulfuric acid aerosols, I might add. Aerosol is a fine particle, 1/1,000,000th of a meter in diameter. A micron, they call it in science. And these aerosols float up there, slowly move down in 2 to 10 years, but they reflect some of the sunlight back to space, cooling the land in the summer. It won't affect the oceans. There's too much of a heat capacity in the oceans. And it won't affect the winter, because there's a lot of mechanisms to warm the winter, causing warmer temperatures in winter. The fountains of the great deep and volcanism will end up with a warm ocean at the end of the flood, a warm ocean. The ocean today averages 4 degrees centigrade, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. It's cold. Even in the tropics, you go down, pretty soon you get down close to freezing, about 1,000 meters. So the vast majority of the ocean is cold. And at the end of the flood, it'd be warm from bottom to top, pole to pole. You could probably take a swim in the Arctic Ocean right after the flood. No sea ice. So with that, what's the big deal with warmer water? The key is, the warmer the water, the faster the evaporation. And the effect would be especially strong at mid and high latitudes compared to today, because the sea surface temperatures are quite cool today. But if they're a lot warmer, you can evaporate a lot more water into the atmosphere at mid and high latitudes to be caught up in storm and dumped on the cold land nearby rapidly. In fact, you can evaporate 7 times as much water into the atmosphere at a temperature of 86 degrees Fahrenheit than you can at one at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. 7 times as much water vapor. That's where we get our abundant moisture for the ice age, from the warm ocean caused by the flood. So you have cool land from the volcanism, cool summers, and a lot more moisture. And this will persist with time, but it'll wane. How will it wane? Because the oceans will cool off during the ice age. And as they cool off, they give off less moisture. And as a result, you'll find out that the ice sheets run out of moisture, and then they start melting. They reach a peak at glacial maximum, and then they melt. And because of this, we can actually time it. We can actually put some ballpark numbers on how long will this take, which I have done. So here's a little schematic about the reflection from dust and aerosols back to space, cool radiation that passes right on through, cooling the land. And because volcanic particles fall out of the atmosphere in 2 to 10 years, depending on the height they're shot up into the stratosphere, we know that it was replenished during the Ice Age, because we had a lot of volcanoes going off during the Ice Age. We have 700 big volcanic cones on the Earth called stratovolcanoes, and a lot of minor ones too. And these were going off during the Ice Age, replenishing the aerosols in the stratosphere for quite a while. And we know this because Charlesworth documents this. He says, signs of Pleistocene, that is Ice Age volcanicity and earth movements, are visible in all parts of the world. Lots of volcanism to reinforce the cooling trend in the summer. And here's kind of a schematic of how it works. At high latitudes, warmer oceans, much warmer oceans, heavy evaporation, volcanism and dust in the upper atmosphere reflecting sunlight back to space, cooling the land, as snow and sleet and ice forming on the land, forming your ice sheets. That's generally how it works. So, then the next question is, well, how rapid was this process? How rapid? Well, this is my evidence of how rapid it was right here. This is it, Jenkins. Indisputable proof that the Ice Age caught these people completely off guard. Seriously, I actually used an equations for the cooling of the ocean where you add up all the heating terms, subtract the cooling terms, and you get a change in temperature, change in time. So I estimated the change in temperature before the ice reaches when it reaches maximum about 20 degrees centigrade, which is 38 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see right here. The average ocean temperature drops to 10 degrees centigrade, which is still 6 degrees centigrade warmer than now. So that was the time it reached glacial maximum. So I solved for change in time using the variables of this ocean balance equation, or budget equation they call them. But there's no way to be accurate with this. So I used maximums and minimums for the variables because I wanted to bracket the time. And then I chose what I felt was a best estimate. And the best estimate was about 500 years. There's my range right there, using outlandish variables for maxes and mins, which I knew were 500 years to reach glacial maximum. Then to cool, then you got to figure out, well, how thick was the ice, and then how fast did it melt? So I had to do the same thing with the thickness of the ice, how much fell over the water versus the land, how much fell over the ice sheets versus the areas non-glaciated, and I used ranges for variables. So I got an average in the northern hemisphere about 2,300 feet. In Antarctica, which is the main continental area that received ice and snow, the Andes and a few Tasmania and the New Zealand and one mountain on southeast Australia were glaciated, but in general the vast majority is on Antarctica, so got about 4,000 feet there. How fast is this all going to melt? I used what's called an energy balance equation over snow and ice cover. That's the most physical, using physics, way you can estimate snow melt. And I used ranges for the variables. The main variable that varied the most was what's called the albedo, or the reflectivity of the snow. Fresh snow reflects 80, 90, 95% of the sunlight back to space. But old snow absorbs about 50 to 40%. So it makes quite a difference. So that was the main variable. So at the edge of the ice sheet, or northern United States, I got a range of 40 to 100 years to melt it, if it was an average depth, which it wasn't. It was a lot thinner on the edge. The best estimate, 70 years. Interior Canada gets less sunshine, cooler temperatures. Interior Scandinavia, same. And therefore, it will be slower melting. So the time to melt the interiors of the ice sheets was about 200 years. The total time for an ice age was just 700 years. 700 years. Was there more than one ice age? They claim there's 50. Well, I actually believe in two ice ages. There was one near the Garden of Eden before the flood. This is it right here, the Earth's first ice age. Okay, I got to explain this a little bit because I've gotten from people in the audience that they were insulted. But what this is simply saying that when we were first created, man and woman's communication was perfect. But it doesn't work so well anymore, does it? Because of sin. I know, I've been married 51 and a half years. And in general, men have clueless issues and women's sensitivity issues. Be very general. They're very general. Let's move on. Anyway, in the journal Geology, these 6 researchers, Young et al., from the University of Alberta in Edmonton, reported on glacial reconstructions in Edmonton area and south. And before they had said there's anywhere from 3 to 5 ice ages in that area. But when they looked at it, they found only one. There's really only one in that area. That's a great place for ice to occur in Alberta. And this is what they say about glacial reconstructions. They commonly assume multiple glaciation hypotheses in all areas that contain a till cover. Till is jargon for glacial debris. Those rocks in various sizes, kind of hummocky, or in end moraines or lateral moraines. They assume it. Well, and then then there are complications in the glacial debris, especially along the edges, because at the edge it can advance forward, melt back, then surge fast, and in between you can have other types of sediment form, maybe a stream gravel or sand, or maybe an woolly mammoth died in there and they got covered up. And when they see that, they see complicated areas, say, oh, that's got to be one ice age. Oh, and there's got a little layer of sand there. Oh, and there's another layer of glacial debris. Oh, there's 2 ice ages right here. That's how they thought. But modern science shows that one ice sheet can do those features because they move a lot at the edge. But they assume it. It's been an assumption all along. Will there be a future ice age? We're not out of the ice age cycle, they claim. And this place was glaciated. Aren't you worried? And they say that the new ice age is due soon because we're still in that cycle. Interglacials only last 10,000 years. We're in an interglacial now called the Holocene. The last ice age melted 10,000 years ago. We're close to occurring. In fact, some people have suggested that global warming will cause it. If anyone saw that movie The Day After Tomorrow, where global warming caused the ice age, and it struck in a matter of days. It was so fantastic. I just laughed my way through the whole thing. And anyway, you can relax. Oh, here's a quote. Got to get a quote from the newspapers. If the past is any indication, the Earth is at the end of another such warm period, poised to descend into a new ice age. Oh, we believe everything we read in the newspapers, do we not? Especially the New York Times. I don't believe anything I read in the newspaper. In fact, I don't even get it anymore because it's so outrageous. In fact, I was involved in a hunting accident on the other side of the Rocky Mountains. I wasn't the one injured, but had to have a helicopter the next day bring this guy out. He fell down a frozen waterfall and had a compound fracture on his leg. We were out all night with him. And when the local Great Falls Tribune reported on it the next day, or maybe it's the following day, every detail was wrong. Every detail. They said it was in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and it was just about 2 miles into what's called Elk Creek, from near Augusta, southwest of Augusta. Anyway, we don't have to fear another ice age. The rainbow is a promise there'll never be another flood, and the flood caused the ice age, therefore there'll never be another ice age. You can relax and not worry about it in this valley right here. Anyway, there are bonus features I'd normally have if I had 15 more minutes, but I'm just going to summarize them. See, the ice age, with this model, I'm able to solve or provide reasonable solutions to a lot of other challenges for the ice age period. Woolly mammoths is just one of them that I talked about last night. Deserts, current deserts that were once very wet during the ice age. And they find that ice age animals and plants was a strange mix of warm climate and cold climate animals buried together. Well, we can understand how cold climate animals would be around, but why about these warm climates? The most outrageous example is the hippo fossils they find in 100 places in England during the Ice Age with woolly mammoths and reindeer and muskox. It just throws them. And then at the end of the Ice Age, there was a mass extinction of animals over 100 pounds. 66% of them worldwide went extinct at the end of their last Ice Age, but not before any of those other 49 Ice Ages. maybe there weren't any 49 other ice ages. And various continents, it's kind of a strange pattern. 70% over North America. For instance, woolly mammoth, Columbian mammoth, saber-toothed tigers, giant ground sloths. Camels actually lived around here during the Ice Age. Horses did too. They went extinct just on this continent, and they introduced them later. Anyway, Australia has about 80% extinction, South America 80%, and that's kind of different. There was hardly glaciated in those areas, so I think it was due to a lot of different conditions at the end of the post-flood ice age: drought, strong winds, dry conditions, fires, etc. And the unglaciated lowlands of Siberia, which I've already mentioned. Anyway, in summary, the Ice Age was a real event not that long ago. It is a major mystery for evolutionary science. Noah's flood caused the transitional climate for an ice age. That gets back to my title of why only the Bible can really explain it. The Ice Age lasted only 700 years. We don't need 100,000 years for an ice age. This is an example where you use biblical different variables from a biblical worldview, and you get totally different results. We can do this with all kinds of other challenges, which I have done on many, but there's many left to go. That's why I'm a researcher. There's only one ice age. Only the Bible explains the ice age because of the flood, and there will be no future ice age. Concluding thoughts. Creationists have a viable mechanism for the last major event in Earth history, while evolutionary scientists are far from a solution. Then why should we believe them for all those older ideas? And there's thousands of them. The extinction of the dinosaurs being one of the most famous, the origins of all these animals and their evolutionary scheme and their deaths and so forth and so on. They got thousands of them, which I consider what's called just so stories. So why should we believe them? Well, we shouldn't. They can't explain the last major event in Earth history. The Ice Age is an example of what can be done with hundreds of other science challenges to the Bible. Time is not a side issue in the creation science evolution, but I found it's key to solving major mysteries that have been around for well over 100 years, sometimes 200 years. How so? Well, they know volcanism cools the climate, but when you stretch all those volcanoes out that we know occurred during the Ice Age to tens of thousands, 100,000 years, each one becomes insignificant, lasts only a couple of years, and it's gone. In the long scheme of theme, where you need a long-term cooling, they don't add up to anything. But if you telescope them all within a few hundred years, wow, it's a powerful cooling mechanism to cool the land. The Ice Age is based on the flood. Therefore, the flood, one of the most despised events by the culture, is a real event of the past. Therefore, it is easy to believe the whole Bible, which tells us how to live here on earth and how to go to heaven. And as a researcher, I and also my wife at times have wanted to bless people with this knowledge. And I've written a number of resources for children, lay people, even some technical monographs. And I don't write too many of those anymore because no one buys them. I write a lot of articles in the technical creationist literature, but some of my resources are Frozen. This is the main one, layman-friendly one, Frozen in Time, the Woolly Mammoth, the Ice Age, and the Bible. Oops. Okay. And a man named Kyle Justice took me out in the field of Montana, Wyoming, Oregon, and Washington, and showed these features, explaining them to you about the Ice Age, also the Lake Missoula flood, and also evidence for the runoff of the floodwaters, and made these 100-minute approximately DVDs showing you out in the field features, if you like that kind of a format. And my wife and I have written these children's books in a fun story way, teaching about the Ice Age, about caveman. They have a Summer with Neanderthals, which is just a people group during the Ice Age, and what's called Cro-Magnon man, living in caves close to the ice sheet, having a woolly mammoth hunt. Instead of an elk hunt, you go hunting for woolly mammoths. And rousting out a cave bear because you need that cave because of the family's growing, etc. It's all in a fun way to teach, you see. We wrote a sequel just focusing on the woolly mammoths, uncovering the mysterious woolly mammoth, life at the end of the Great Ice Age, in story form. Fun story for young people as well as adults. Oops. And decided that, the young people need to learn about geology. It's geology that first came out that brought in evolution, by the way. Darwin was a geologist before he was a biologist. And it's important to teach the young people about geology in a fun way. This is a grasshopper cartoon form showing all kinds of features from a flood point of view. And for young people as well as adults. And I have one on dinosaurs too, I might add, to teach these things before they get hammered in the culture. That was the point of that. And of course, I couldn't help but write a weather book. And if you know nothing about the evolution creation issue and you have a lot of questions, there's a Creation Answers book, which we don't have over there actually. But anyway, you can get it online. And that's it. I want to leave this verse with you. Your faith should not rest on the wisdom of men. That's what evolution is. That's what deep time is, or millions of years. Trying to explain everything without God with pure human reason. And you know how well humans reason. Sometimes, in fact, a lot of times, not so well. We should depend on the power of God. God has the power to create. He has the power to produce a flood, etc. And here's some websites if you're interested. And mine's on the bottom. I have 2 free ebooks on there if you can read. And the main one I recommend is creation.com. On there, they have 12,000 articles you can read for all ages, all scientific abilities. So if someone challenges you about something, what about carbon-14? What about dinosaurs? Well, and you don't know, Well, you say, I'll get back with you. And you can go to creation.com and get lots of answers, lots of material, all free. 12,000 articles over 40 years for all ages. I recommend this site to you. And if you have questions, you can get answers from this website. That's all I have, and I will probably can open up for a few questions.
Good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, do you have questions for Mike today? You'd like to discuss, or?
What made you start to do this?
Well, I have 2 degrees in atmospheric science from the University of Washington. I like science. And I decided, they say evolution's a fact, it's contrary to the Bible and so forth, and I'm going to look into it. I found out there's hardly any evidence for evolution. Why? What's going on? Why do they say it's a fact? That got me interested, perked my interest, and I got deeper into it. And I thought, and there's research that was being done. So I said, what can I do in research? And the Ice Age popped into my mind. So I worked on that, and then from there it got into the flood, because there's interaction between all fields. Got into geology, then geophysics, and just mushroomed. And that's all I do when I'm at home. I do research and writing. And I can read all day. It just blows my wife's mind. But for some reason, the Lord has given me the ability to do it, and I thank Him.
How do they make sense of global warming with the idea that they expect another ice age?
Well,
Repeat the question.
okay, repeat the question. How can they project that there's a new ice age coming with global warming? Well, they think that global warming is going to hold it off for a little while. It's generally what they say, but it's not going to last forever, and so the ice age is just delayed a little bit. That's generally what they say.
So they're going to get rid of global warming so that we can have the ice age.
Then we'll have to fight ice ages.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. One of the reasons I say that natural processes are 50% or more of this global warming is because when you show that global average temperature since about 1900, it went up pretty strong between 1910 and 1940. at a time when carbon dioxide was hardly increasing at all. That kind of goes against that. And then from about 1945 to 1975, we had global cooling. Global cooling, when then CO2 was going up. That's why they're not correlated very well. And all kinds of books came out, and articles in Newsweek and all those places. Oh, the next ice age is coming. In fact, I got 3 of those books. Oh, they're very fun to read after the fact, but they've changed everything. And now they almost say the same thing. It's, ice age was going to cause drought. Well, now it's the global warming. So they've kind of erased the ice age in those books, sort of, and replaced global warming or climate change. Climate change that's a useless word because climate's always changing a little bit. We had the little ice age between 1300 and 1880 when all the glaciers in the world actually advanced. Before that, we had the medieval warm period between about 800 and 1200 AD, and that's when the Vikings colonized southwest Greenland. And then the little ice age covered up their farms, and now they're just as global warming is causing them to recede, they're starting to show more evidence of the Vikings' farms. So,
I think it's Genesis 8:22 or 23 talks about there will, and this was right after Noah and the flood, and God said to Noah that there would be a time of seeding, a time of harvest, a time of heating, and a time of cooling. And it completely wipes out the idea of global warming and introduces the idea of hot
it's
and
going to be
cold
going up
as a
and down.
constant thing throughout time.
And that's what we have.
Yeah, so that verse is worth taking a look at. And I forget whether it's 22 or 23, but it's right in there.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. Michael, thank you for being here today. Just really appreciate his heart for science and the Word of God. And again, go see the table back there and take some of Mike back home with you and bless him. Father, we just want to thank you for what you've done in our lives and the truth of your Word. And God, we just pray your blessing today in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.